31 years, also an adjunct professor from Cincinnati, so at the University of Cincinnati. And I do a lot of work with graphics and AR and VR more recently, but mobility and wearable devices I've been doing for very many years, and again, head of R&D for this one particular division of Siemens.
Great, thanks. Unfortunately, no class credits for attending this evening. Next, on to Nathan Christensen. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Nathan Christensen. I'm the manager at Overlay TK of the Scientific Methods and Engineering Methods group. Some of my roles there are responsible with immersive visualization, which includes virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality methods. We're looking at methods of how ways we can introduce that to engineers who are developing space products and some of our products. I'm also involved with high-performance computing, computational software, all the products that Mohsen talked about, PLM, CAD, NX, simulation, all the tools that Siemens sells and we get from other vendors as well too. Have those responsibilities within Overlay TK across the organization and across the corporation.
Thanks, Nathan. I always think it's important when you're talking about some of these future technologies, it's always reassuring to have a rocket scientist in the room, and we do in the form of
At our place, we have a saying, we say, actually, it really is rocket science at our place. So,
I think you guys have produced about 16,000 rocket motors to date.
yeah.
Wow.
So, on to our next panelist, Matt Meisnix. You have a very broad perspective here, and you've also worn two hats in the AR and VR space, so please introduce yourself.
Yeah, at least two. See, I'm a partner at Super Ventures. We're a new venture fund that focuses on seed stage investing for AR and some VR startups. So ideally, we would be the first check that a couple of founders would receive to try and turn their idea into a product. And we're fortunate enough to be early enough in this industry to really get a good look at pretty much everything that's going on from chips to apps. Prior to this, I ran a research lab at Samsung, trying to figure out augmented reality, what it would mean for a company like that. And before Samsung, I had my own startup doing augmented reality software. So poked around at a lot of stuff in this space and trying to solve a lot of problems. And now we're trying to fund those teams to try and solve a lot of the problems that are there.
Great, thanks, Matt. And last but not least, Matt Camerite from Dacry. Matt, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm from Dacry. We're a provider of hardware and software for augmented reality specifically. And, I've been working in AR for coming up on 6 years now. I was actually in an enterprise in a 30,000 person manufacturing company that was one of Dacry's first customers prior to coming over to join the organization, and then have gotten to be part of the wild ride of growing from 30 people to 350 over the course of the last 2.5 years. So while we still very much consider ourselves a startup, it's fun to look back on that entire journey and kind of how the marketplace has evolved.
Great, thank you. So hopefully you'll agree, we've got a great panel here. I'm going to take the prerogative of asking the first two questions, and then we do want to open it up for Q&A, so please be thinking of the questions you'd like to pose to the panelists as well. So just to start off, PwC conducted a survey of about 120 US manufacturing companies in a report we published earlier this year. And what we found is across that set, and this is manufacturing companies typically in the revenue range of 250 million to greater than about 10 billion or so. We found that a good third are either using or plan to adopt AR and VR technologies in the next 3 years. So it's definitely heading towards the mainstream. So, but based on that, we're seeing applications along the lines that Mohsen showed earlier, all the way from product development through operations use, service and maintenance, training, improving efficiency, improving operator safety, and so on. Let me ask the panelists, what are you seeing? Where are we with this technology today? So perhaps if we start off at the far end.
Sure.
Matt.
Yeah, so looking back over the last few years, I would say, we've actually seen a huge efficiency gain in not just having to explain what AR is to people in the first meeting anymore. And literally every organization we work with now has some sort of program. Sometimes it's a department, sometimes it's a single role, but everyone, has some sort of meaningful investment of people and activity around augmented and virtual reality. And so that's a huge leg up, just that mutual understanding kind of coming in. And while there's still, a wide variety of different statefulness of those programs, I'm very impressed with how it's come across in the last 3 or 5 years.
Great, thanks. Matt, how about you? What are you seeing in terms of the state currently?
Yeah, we're seeing pitches every week, of particularly companies focused on enterprise manufacturing. And it's honestly one of the two domains that we are particularly interested in, either enabling technologies to try and invent new products or this full stack enterprise solutions. We don't really believe in gaming or content or consumer type services are short-term opportunities. But what Matt said, a lot of the companies pitching us now are really solving two broad problems. They're either solving like hands-free type of use cases of people on factory floors or in messy type environments, or there's some sort of simulation and training type of use case. And nearly all of them are finishing pilots, going into sort of production rollout. There's no one coming to us saying, hey, we're doing 10 million in revenue a year and running fast. It's still early. But all of them are, the successful pilots. The metrics are working, the benefits are there, and the sponsoring companies are starting to step up and back them into roles.
Great, thanks. How about you, Nathan?
I think you and I talked about a story earlier where I had our general manager, Charlie Precourt, former shuttle astronaut, came to me a couple of years ago and said, why don't we put together something? As a shuttle astronaut, he spent a lot of time working with virtual reality. And NASA, back when he was an astronaut, that's a long time ago, probably 15 years ago, about trying to prepare for missions and do things with virtual reality. You see some of the duct tape and stuff he put together, some of the pictures he showed me, and he said, I'd like us to do something with overlay TK. Can't we do something? And I said, well, I think we probably could. I've been out and slipped around caves about $1 million, $1.5 million. I said, yeah, I think how much money we got? And he goes, well, how about $50K? I said, well, we really can't get much going for that. And bottom line was, we started looking into things. And I said, I saw some things out there, saw some things in the consumer market with Oculus, some flat panels from Samsung and things that we put together a system for about $30,000, a Powerwall with the DK2, put together some really nice demos, did some things for about $30,000. And so that's when I realized that, hey, things are really moving here, because VR has been out there a long time. A friend of mine says, gosh, he said, I was thinking about going into VR 20 years ago. He goes, but it hasn't gone anywhere, so I'm glad I didn't pick that as a career. So I think it's really moving and moving more rapidly here in the last few years. We're seeing a lot of change. I think it's becoming affordable. Like, affordability is the biggest thing. One is how, as an industry, we're an industry partner. We're not a developer. We're actually building product. How do we make VR work for us? How do we become more productive? How do we do things better, faster, less costly? That's what we're all about. And if we can take that technology and make us better, faster, make us a better competitor, we can beat our competitors with it, then that's what we want to do. I think it's getting to that point where it is affordable. Not just the big players, the Fords, the Boeings who are spending the millions of dollars. Some of the medium-sized aerospace companies like ourselves can get involved with this.
Great, thanks, Nathan. That's quite a feat with $50,000. That's just not coming too many people that it can be done that cheaply. So most of you obviously talked about a number of examples. Any others that you'd like to add on in terms of what you're seeing today?
Well, I just wanted to mention that I see a fundamental change. Just give you an example. 15 years ago, when we were developing apps on smartphones, and we would go to our customers and say, look, this is going to really improve your productivity, and they would say, what's a smartphone? So there was nothing we could do. Things have changed now. Our customers are actually ahead of us. They have these devices. They just don't have applications on them. They're pushing us. They're saying, we have all these ideas. We have all these use cases. We know that they're going to help us. Please come and develop applications on these devices because we need them. And that is a huge change, because we don't have to sell them on the idea anymore. We just have to create the right solutions for them. And that, I think, to me, is a huge opportunity in this particular area.
Great, thank you. So Clearly a lot of exciting things going on today. What are you seeing as some of the most promising applications in the near term? We'll talk about the long-term future in a moment, but what about near term? Where do you think some of the most promising applications? Perhaps we go in reverse order and start with most.
Well, I think to me, what I have observed from our customers is the fact that they begin to understand their environment a lot better once they put the device on their heads. And that, I always thought that they're going to get bogged down with the fact that it was different or that it wasn't real. They actually begin to get it. They begin to get a different sense for what they're touching. The fact that they can walk around an object, it's so satisfying to them that they want to spend time in that environment and continue looking at what they have and look at it from all different angles, walk underneath it, walk around it. I think this interaction with the virtual world in this mixed reality environment that we're talking about is the biggest short-term opportunity. I think as we get into it, some of the other things that I talked about, like collaboration, where you can put people in distributed locations in one place and have them talk about the same part and the same object and actually do collaborative design, even though they may be in different continents. That's a longer term, but short term, it's individuals and their interaction with these virtual objects. To me, that's a great opportunity.
Great, thanks. How about you, Nathan?
Looking at in two areas where I think we're particularly interested in. One is manufacturing training. How do we train our operators and the guys on the floor on the line who are building our rocket motors? Handling rocket fuel is very dangerous. It's not an easy operation. It's not something to just practice with. You want to practice spilling that on the floor and then practice cleaning it up? I don't think so. So we do a lot. We spend a lot of money and a lot of expense trying to go around and do it with empty containers and not turning things on really, not turning on the mix bowls, not doing things. So one of the things we're trying to do is, can we do industrial training? Can we do manufacturing training? Can we teach these guys how to handle these fuels safely and efficiently in a virtual reality where they can make mistakes? We're actually programming it we've done a pilot program using Unity, using a lot of NX models, so Siemens, our CAD models from Siemens NX. Brought those in and built entire buildings and mocked that up, and then had them go through and look for anomalies, things in the past that had caused explosions or fires while they were preparing rocket fuel, preparing rockets. Put those in there. Did they notice those? Did they understand it? So I think industrial training is a great place. Other spaces like Mosen talked about. I brought some engineers into our immersive visualization lab for the first time. They'd never really done, they'd been working on these models for months, 2-3 months. They built the models. They're intimately familiar with them from an engineering perspective. They got in there and we put the screen on full scale, it's a power wall, I've got the tracking system on, and they're just amazed at what they saw. As they walked around, looked underneath, looked around it, they're like, hey, that's not right. And these are the guys who built them all. They're more intimate with it than anybody. And they found things that they hadn't seen before. And they just understood things better and saw things. Now they're not looking at it, even though they have 3 or 4 displays on their desktop. They're looking at it in full scale, they're looking at it around and under it, and they just have a different perspective on it as the design engineers about it than they did just on a CAD tool and on a standard desktop.
Great, thanks. Matt?
Just reinforce the same things that we're seeing the startups that are getting traction like today, doing visualization, training, simulation. Examples, companies that are doing sports training where the quarterback can run through a play like over and over and over again and just train themselves to react intuitively by running that simulation. Architecture, real estate, building construction companies are able to walk the customer or walk the engineer through a life-size model and get a sense of what it's going to feel like. Construction companies, like engineering construction companies, are doing design reviews where they were using just plans, and now they're actually able to do a 3D model and pass it around and inspect it. Those sorts of things are working today and getting traction, and multiple customers and startups are wanting to grow businesses there.
Great, thanks. And last but not least, Matt.
Go out on a limb and address this differently. What we're seeing today is actually very poor use case selection. Not for many of our partners, they're all brilliant, but But what we're seeing in the market is a lot of people who are getting exposed to AR for the first time, getting exposed to some of these display capabilities for the first time, and they're picking things that are visually impressive, big complex 3D models, extended animation sequences, things that would probably annoy most 30-year experts on the job who are performing that task over and over again, or who have a huge variety of tasks to sift through and only so much attention over the course of a given shift. So I think where we see the opportunity is really around defining rules like where is there a really high cost of error, where is there something that's not repeated very often, somebody who's got to just manage thousands of different procedures or thousands of different pieces of equipment, and it's already a burden for somebody who's been doing it for decades. And then the bifurcation of the workforce only exacerbates that issue that's presenting itself. And then actually I'd throw out almost the opposite of the high fidelity content, a low content threshold. Where can you take existing content, bring it in? There are a lot of extensions and plugins that do bring things like JT and Step into Unity already. Both open source ones as well as ours does that as well. But anywhere where you can make use of a lot of existing content to get something into practical application quickly, because the change management problems are just as big to solve as the technology problems, and so you got to run concurrently.
It's a very good point. And as with so many technologies, it's not just the technological challenges, but thinking about, and I think Motion touched on this earlier, thinking about virtual reality and some of the issues that some users are experiencing with that technology today, those particularly susceptible to motion sickness. I think there's another interesting use case that we've seen. At this point, it's a trial application, but a major logistics company tried, and this is sort of stretching the definition of augmented reality to our earlier conversations, is using smart glasses in the context of pick and pack within the warehouse, and finding that productivity of the workers in that warehouse improved something like 25% or so. So huge promise for workers being presented this information. So now let's get the crystal ball out. So getting back to that study I mentioned earlier. So about a third of our surveyed companies said that what they're struggling with at the moment is understanding what the compelling use cases are. For now, they're sort of sitting and waiting to see. As you get your crystal balls out and look to the future, what do you think the opportunities are 10 years out or so in terms of where we can go with AR and VR?
I think the biggest issue is everyone's silver bullet hunting. So they're all looking for the same use case across dozens of different industries, or they want to take a page out of somebody else's playbook and kind of benefit from the pilot that they've run. But ultimately, the ones that are going to be most successful are where the most waste and the most pain exists within that organization today. And a lot of the underpinnings of how you execute are very similar. So you can bring the program plan over, but trying to bring the use case over, I think is going to cause more issues than it eliminates.
Yeah, I don't think there is a silver bullet. I was working in the smartphone industry since 2000, and I used to hear this from the carriers all the time. Like, what's the use case for a smartphone? What's the the killer app for a smartphone? And there wasn't one. You'd say, well, it's the internet, something general like that. And it turned out the internet was the killer use case for the smartphone, but it took the underlying platform to really come to life to really realize that potential. And I think for AR, VR, smart glasses, whatever you want to call it, between today and when that ideal platform comes to life, it's going to be lots of particular point solutions that solve a particular pain point that you have today. And when whoever it is, Apple, magically, whoever comes out with these glasses that we all want to buy, you'll then just start seeing all these apps and use cases and ideas come to life that no one ever imagined. I mean, in smartphones, I was right there, inventing this stuff, and none of us thought of Uber. We were all talking about coupons when you walk past Starbucks, and we're hearing the same sorts of cliche use cases for smart glasses today. And I don't know what the Uber of smart glasses is going to be.
Just to add on to that, I think we're seeing sort of the opposite problem than the smartphone problem, which is everyone has too many use cases. They all have hundreds of things that they could do, and they call you for weeks after they first get exposed to it with things that you could potentially execute on. It's more of a question of prioritization than anything else. So don't want to give the impression of doom when there's actually a ton of opportunity.
I want to go off script just a little bit. So, Matt, as you were talking about the smartphones and what it really took to have that technology leap forward. One of the keys to success, of course, was the ecosystem. Critical right now in the context of VR and AR. While you've got the microphone, do you want to say anything about ecosystems and the importance?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the days where we think one player is going to really own every layer of this space are quickly moving behind us, and good riddance to a large extent. I think there are going to be dozens of players at every layer of this stack for quite a long time, and I think people understanding that they've got to work with others in order to be successful, from the smallest to the largest players in this space, is it's refreshing that people are addressing it that way. It's refreshing we're having events to have that conversation. But those conversations have to get concrete quickly, because there's a lot of interesting work to be done, and these programs are happening right now. So kind of getting past the what does the future look like in 10 years to hey, what's the program that's going to be successful in the next 6 months is where the partnership discussions really take off.
Right, thanks. Anyone else want to chime in on ecosystems before we go back to the long-term question?
No one knows. I mean, there'll need to be developers, there need to be apps, the winning vendors will need to be able to be the best vendors who can support the developers to build great apps. I don't think anyone will be able to have a completely vertical, completely closed ecosystem. And I think it's largely going to come down to how many smart glasses sell. Like if it's if these devices sell similar to like a console market, like Xbox or something, then there just won't be enough units out there for a software developer to sell to one ecosystem. They'll need to sell their app across products. But with smartphones, you can focus just on iOS today, and there's enough iOS devices out there that you can build a good business just on iOS. You don't have to go horizontal. So I think that question of how the ecosystem is going to evolve is completely open today, and it's going to be years before we really understand how it's going to end up.
Great, thanks. So, Nathan, back to the long-term view. What do you think we're going to see in 10 years or so?
I agree with both Matt and Matt on this. I think there's parts of both. I think in order to get the technology moving, we need to pick things today that pay back. As a company, I can't go in and sell even more than $100,000 if I haven't got a good, solid business case and use case where we're going to save some money. It's going to make our product better, or we're going to produce a more reliable product out of it. So I got to find those use cases, and I got to get them in the forefront, or we're not going anywhere with our project. It's going to stop. It's going to die in the lab. It's not going anywhere. At the same time, 10 years from now, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, like you said, Uber and whatever else, we're going to be doing portability. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be things out there we didn't think about, I'm sure, that are going to be there for sure. So I think I agree with both of you. Both points you made. So.
Great, thank you. We're just trying to find something controversial for this.
Yeah, just one point on that further on the ecosystem. If you are a developer or thinking of starting a company now, we'll get pitched by someone doing an enterprise or some sort of app for HoloLens or for Oculus, and generally we'll hear the pitch, and our response will be, look, do you think you can sell this app for $4,000 or $5,000? Because today you just can't sell your app for 99 cents. You have to convince that customer to spend $3,500 on a piece of hardware to support your app. So that's kind of the bar today to get across for a developer. You need to think, is your app worth a customer buying the entire hardware stack to drive your app? That's kind of value for sure.
Great, thanks. One person, anything would you like to predict what we're going to see in the future?
I think, I want to use the example of the phones. I don't know if you all watch any 80s movies, but the phones were like a brick, right? They were expensive and they were huge. What happened? I mean, besides the fact that we have the ability to communicate, they became cheaper, the form factor became a lot nicer, And I think this is what's going to happen with these wearable devices. I can see in 10 years having basically a piece of glass in front of my eyes and being able to socialize with individuals that are all around me, and we can share this mixed reality world that we were just talking about with each other, and we can all participate in it. And I think it will be a very rich environment that people want to be in, and because it's affordable, and because it's very normal, because it's a piece of glass, it's not some heavy, bulky device, and I think it will happen in 10 years, because of, again, if you use the example of the phones, what happened in 10 years. So that's my prediction.
Great, well, thank you. So we've talked about what the future may hold, both short term and long term. Thinking about having, in the case of this panel, that our customers make money. Where do you see the opportunities are in terms of ROI or competitive advantage using these technologies?
I think what we're seeing that's pretty unique about AR and VR is that almost everyone is focused on revenue generating opportunity around it. So the cost saving stuff is sort of proceeding in parallel. They're looking at those use cases. Smaller program teams actually around that. But I think, whether it's the economic climate for the last few years or whatever, or it's just more fun to make money, which is probably always true. But the focus is really around productization, service layer on top of it, and generating revenue rather than a focus on cost savings. I think everyone's squeezed every penny they can out of lean manufacturing and process improvement and a lot of these elements. And so they're looking for where that's that change. And I think a lot of it is in new service models, more distributed labor approaches.
Great, thank you. Matt?
It's a good question. I mean, the startups pitching us are more going for the cost saving, getting fewer errors, better productivity out of their teams.
Don't worry, their customers will make a product.
Yeah, sure. Along with some of that, I don't know if you call it novelty or gimmick or sort of a bit of polish on their sales pitch, to help sell the product that they're trying to make.
It's an interesting challenge because that's kind of what I'm having to do right now is I'm going through a budgetary process and I'm looking at next year's budget, and my VP is saying, well, okay, what are you going to do with it? What's your business case? I said, well, my technical guys are like, hey, we need Vive, we need Oculus, we need this, and it's like, well, what are you going to build with it? What are we going to do? What are we going to say to it? So we're trying to build that ROI. I was talking to Mosen earlier about, I brought a list of questions, by the way, from my team, that they said, hey, talk to Mosen about this and tell us what Siemens is going to do so we know how to pitch this case. So I think it's true, you got to put together an ROI. I mean, you got to be able to at least, not say put it together, but you got to have a story that's going to make you profitable in the end and save your money. Well, the technology is just cool stuff otherwise.
I'll save you a bunch of time. If you avoid $1 million error, you can buy a lot more devices than if you save 10 seconds on every test.
And that's one of the use cases we use. We're not so much about saving a penny or saving $1. I mean, aerospace, it's expensive, okay?
By the time you measure it, you've spent it.
Right. And so for us, it's about precision, about getting it right the first time. You get into space, it's hard to change. You blow it on the launch pad, it doesn't, that's a big revenue loss for us. The political implications and from having a catastrophic event. We had one here a year ago, November.
There's some devices.
Wallops Island, yeah, and I think, those kinds of things are really, really unique. So if we can avoid one of those, you can spend a lot of money up front. So again, it's about building a business case that either makes your product better, faster, cheaper, or more reliable.
Thanks, Nathan. So Matt, you have the privileged position of seeing and speaking with many companies engaged in this technology. What are you seeing in terms of the real drivers for ROI?
Well, I think Nathan has already touched on this. What we're seeing from these customers is they've already been convinced that their workers have a better understanding of what they're dealing with when they are actually can, if you will, touch the virtual objects. They're 3D, they're real instead of being jammed to the screen. And I think that intuitiveness that comes, that understanding that comes, eventually ends up improving the quality of the products that we're creating. And this is what they see as the return on investment. That they can reduce cost, improve the quality, and this is a technology that can give it to them, and they have been seeing it because they have these devices that at least they can get some kind of a model in, and they already see people have a different type of reaction and understanding of their environment when they can walk around it and look at it. Exactly as Nathan says, this is what I'm hearing from a lot of our customers, regardless of which industry you're in. I think it is a lot easier convincing them in this particular case of the return on investment than we've seen in the past. So I think it's a much easier sell, the way I see it with the customers, as they're perceiving ROI.
I think there are great opportunities when it comes to reducing costs and cycle times as it relates to product development, where you can actually share with a potential or sample customer base what the product may end up looking like, have the engineers look at it and do so in virtual reality versus the high cost of actually developing physical models. That's one simple example. And I know one of the promises of augmented reality in the manufacturing workplace, particularly, for example, in a process-intensive industry, is the ability for workers to be able to follow instructions presented to them on a screen, and essentially being able to perform tasks that are above what they may have been trained to do. And then we were talking earlier, Matt, about in regulated industries being able to do so in a way that allows the system not only to ensure that they're executing tasks by the book, but that the tasks they do execute are being recorded, which is required in some industries, drug manufacturing is one example.
Yeah, and even upstream of that, making sure that the right person in the right state of mind is getting the right task too, because even before they perform that, you pick up anomalies or have to sift back through the compliance data capture that you've done throughout that process. If you can tell that someone is stressed or confused prior to undertaking a task, and you can have them go through an attention challenge or something else to prove that they're ready to perform that really critical operation, or if not, connect them to an expert to help them with that. I think it's that kind of layering that you're going to see both with human-to-human interaction and human-to-AI, human-to-bot sort of interaction that'll become just more and more subtle. But that kind of erasing the barrier between what you know and what you could know. Those things that today require you to get a device out and do a search, go through an index.
Great, thanks. We have a lot of folks in the audience working across a variety of startups. So one question is, it sounds great what we've been talking about, but there are a number of technical challenges. What do each of you think are the major challenges that really need to be solved, and potentially there are folks in this room here that could help solve them? Most of you, let's start.
First, it's the limitation of the devices. So if there are anyone out here that can build better hardware, please step up, because we know that the perfect device doesn't exist yet. We either have devices that are tethered or devices that are not tethered but have a lot of limitations with the field of view, with the memory. I mean, if you look at, for instance, the HoloLens that we have out there, most people don't